What's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, and today we're going to be discussing the Fort Myers 8. Now, the Fort Myers 8 is tied to Daniel Conahan. This is part 3 of 4 that is going up in regards to Daniel Conahan. So, if you're new to this, 2 videos ago I introduced Daniel Conahan. I'll get into what happened to him after all of these in part 4, where you learn about like what happens, how everything kind of happened, how everything went down, all that jazz. So on March 23rd of 2007, a land surveyor found 2 human skulls in a wooded area that were near Rockville and Arcadia Streets in Fort Myers. Now, this surveyor then called the police, and with the help of cadaver dogs, they were then able to discover 8 sets of remains that were from male origin. These men became known as the Fort Myers 8 because they were found within a 50 yards of one another and had met their demise sometime between 1987 and 2001. That was the time frame they had. All of these remains indicated that they were between the ranges of 18 to 49 in age, and 7 of the 8 men had received good dental care. One of the men is believed to be homeless and had a rough life due to bone damage and poor dental care. I'll get into that when we go talk about our victims. Now, the area in which the bodies were discovered is owned by Fort Myers, and it is an isolated area that, there's roads leading to it that are of only sand or dirt consistency. So kind of an off-roading vehicle would be the one that you would have to take to get to this area. Now, 4 of the 8 men have been identified. 2 were identified in 2007, 1 in 2008, and 1 in 2022, which I've already previously discussed. And I'll put in a card when I start talking about him. So the prime suspect in this entire case is Daniel Conahan. He is presumed to have committed the Hog Trail Killings between 1993 and 1996, and he has been incarcerated for the murder of Richard Montgomery, which we'll talk about in the next video. So there are significant similarities between the Fort Myers 8 and the Hog Trail Killings, and that is because they're all male transients who disappeared somewhere between 1993 and 1996 in either Charlotte or Sarasota County, Florida. And there is one surviving victim, Stanley Burden, of which was attacked in 1984 in Fort Myers, about a mile from where the Fort Myers 8 were discovered. So this is where it all ties together. All of this comes together, nice big picture. So if you're still following along for part 1 of this, you're welcome. That's how they all fit together. So these victims were given letters, and the ones that are identified, I'll also speak their names as well. So victim H is the one that was identified in September of 2022 as Robert Ronald Sodden, or Bobby as his nickname. He was discovered in Fort Myers in 2007. He disappeared from Fort Myers in 1996. So same year Daniel Conahan was arrested. This is when Bobby went missing. Now, obviously I discussed that the land surveyor discovered the 2 human skulls and they found them. This is when he was found. So there was no clothing. There's no coffins that the bodies were in, no body bags or anything else that was used to hold any of these sets of remains. There was also no signs of that anyone had been near these scenes at all. The tracks were they were brushed away, so nobody had come to this area in a very long time. Now I'll link his video in a card above so you can kind of go more to his information, if you will. John Blevins is another victim of the Fort Myers 8. Now, he was a transient man who lived in Fort Myers. He had a record for loitering, possession of drug paraphernalia, and for prostitution. Now, there was an arrest report that listed him as a salesman and that he was residing at the Blue Lantern Motel in Fort Myers. He was last seen in 1995, but he was never reported missing. And according to his mom, he had plans to go out and come back later, but he never did. His remains also discovered in March 2007, and he was identified in November of 2007. Eric David Kohler disappeared in 1995 from Port Charlotte, Florida. His remains, again, were found in March of 2007, and he as well was identified in November of 2007. Victim C, or as he was identified as Jonathan James T. Hay, in September of 2008. Jonathan was a drifter who liked to work odd jobs and was known to get in trouble from time to time. For the last time, he was heard from his mom when he called her in October of 1995, and he asked her for some money when he was in Fort Myers. He was never heard from again, and a missing persons was never filed. At the time of his disappearance, he actually was wanted for a probation violation. He was identified via his half-sister's DNA. His body was moved to the St. Michael Cemetery in Aurora after he was identified. So the next victims we're going to talk about, I have them as their NamUs number, as their actual letter, so bear with me. Victim 1031UMFL is a victim that has not been identified. It's believed that he is between the ages of 26 and 45. He's estimated to be between 5 feet to 5'7" in height. He had significant trauma to his bones. He had healed fractures to his ribs, specifically his right side. He had periositis of his calf bones and of his left forearm bone. And he also suffered from a defect on his sternum, which they can't fully determine whether it was a congenital defect or a trauma-related defect. He had significant damage to his teeth, unfilled cavities, an abscess, old silver fillings, and they also believe that he suffered from periodontal disease. John Doe 1037UMFL, also discovered in March of 2007. His remains were of partial skeletal state when they found him. It's described that he's between the ages of 20 to 35. He's 5'6" to 6'1" in height. They also weren't able to determine what weight he was, but that he had a muscular build. They also could not determine his hair or eye color due to the state of his remains. They also weren't able to tell if there was any identifying markings on his body because of the state of his remains. But they were able to tell that he had up-to-date dental work done due to having silver fillings on his posterior teeth, and that all 4 of his wisdom teeth had come in. His identification is still in the works, so when that comes up, I will put a new video up for him. John Doe number 1036UMFL is still unidentified. His remains were partially skeletonized as well. They believe he's between the ages of 18 to 35, that he is either of white or Hispanic background. He was between the size of 5'8" to 6'3" in height, and they also believe that he was a rather tall man with a partial limp. And they believe that this would help identify him, but he hasn't been identified yet, unfortunately. His right wrist also was fractured, and just like the 1037 UMFL, he also had all 4 of his wisdom teeth and up-to-date silver fillings on his posterior teeth. His identification is still pending as well. John Doe number 1035 UMFL, he still does not have a name. His skeletonized remains were found with the other Fort Myers 8. They believe he's between the ages of 25 to 45. He's also the shortest of victims that they found. I believe he's between 5'4" to 5'10". And I preface this that he's the shortest of this set because there's also an additional victim that was found in 2002, which I will get to in a second. And they also believe he's of medium build. So he's generally like one of the smallest ones found. But they were able to determine from his skeleton that he had occupational injuries, like from working hard for years. They also found signs of arthritis in his back and in his hips that also suggested that he suffered from ankylosing spondylitis. That is a very big word, big tongue tie. And also that he suffered from fractures like on his right side, specifically like his ribs from ribs 8 to 10, and that his vertebra 4 through 5 were also fractured as well. So he suffered significant body damage from his work. They are currently still working on his identification as well. So an additional victim was found in Punta Gorda in 2002. This is John Doe 3303 UMFL. He was found on January 6th of 2002 in Punta Gorda. His remains were skeletal, but they believe he died just months prior, which this doesn't really fit in with Daniel Conahan, but they have him. I don't really know if this is a Daniel Conahan victim, but it's believed that this man was between the ages of 30 to 59. He's possibly mixed race and that he weighed 125 to 172 pounds. His height ranged between 5'3" to 5'11", and this victim was found with a gold watch as well. His remains were discovered on Zemel Road in Punta Gorda. It is speculated that he's another victim of Daniel Conahan, who killed several men in the 90s, but I don't know if he is. So that, my friends, is the Fort Myers 8. Look forward to my final video for part 4 about Daniel Conahan and about what happened. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in another one.